Welcome to your introduction to painting the figure. As you should already know, the link on the bottom is a set of Cornell notes that will help you retain information from this presentation. Throughout art history, the human figure has been a central subject for artists. This narrative explores how different artistic movements, particularly Cubism, Futurism, and Mexican Muralism, have revolutionized the way figures are painted. The essential question is, how did Cubism, Futurism, and Mexican muralists affect the way figures are painted today? We will also be using the design process in which we think, make, and improve our work. You should also be thinking about the strong work Venn diagram, where you'll be using things like the rule of thirds and elements and principles, as well as experimenting with media and techniques as you come up with some creative, communicated idea or unusual viewpoint in your work. The learning targets for this unit are: I understand how to use gesture to draw the figure, capturing the form, movement, and weight of a figure. I created a painting of a figure in movement while unifying the underpainting, glaze layers, and brushstrokes. I understand the difference between Cubism, Futurism, and Mexican muralists and will select an appropriate art historical reference as a resource artist as inspiration for my figure painting. I demonstrated strong craftsmanship, which means neatness or skill, and I'll utilize all the requirements on the next page to create a unique painting. The figure requirements are: using the rule of thirds to create an area of emphasis that is not in the center of the piece. Unifying the underpainting with the glaze layers and brush strokes that you utilize in your work. Filling the whole canvas, which means the objects in your design should be large enough that they stretch across the entire perimeter of the canvas that you have. Creating movement by using diagonal lines in some way in the figure. Experimenting with techniques, such as a color field, collage, or other experimental way of painting. And creating a type of meaning in your artwork in either the subject matter or background in some way. I also want you to realize that there has been a struggle in art over what is the most important, the emotion of the piece or the technical construction of the work. As humans have moved through time, the pendulum swing or blue line on this diagram took hundreds of years in the beginning. But with the development of different technologies, the swing now goes back and forth so fast that it can seem like both the technical aspects of art and the emotional qualities are valued equally. Before delving into the modern movements, it's crucial to understand the basics of figure drawing. Human proportions are generally the same from one being to another. That means that adult figures are typically 7.5 to 8.5 heads tall. There are also basic shapes that artists use to create figure using cylindrical type forms. We also use measurement techniques using a pencil to measure and compare body parts. Notice that you should keep your elbow locked when you do this. This is the same type of measurement that you would use in any other drawing that you do. You should also consider perspective when you are drawing the figure. This diagram gives you some idea what a figure would look like if it was lying down. We are also going to be studying the skeletal and muscular structures in anatomy for accuracy in our figure painting. You should also be thinking about the planes in space as you create your figures. We will be participating in some gesture drawing as a warm-up activity for the larger painting so you understand more about weight, movement, and angles and how important they are when attempting to represent the figure. Before we get too much further, I'd like you to see Henri Toulouse-Lautrec's work. Lautrec was known for capturing poses minimally and quickly. His works also had bold colors of the nightlife in Paris, and he was the first artist to create modern poster art. Even his unfinished works captured the essence of the figure. He would often use washes of color and line-rendered texture to add value to his compositions. Again, some of the important things in Lautrec's work is that he created gestures to capture the figure quickly. He drew with few well-placed lines. He was the first poster artist, and he moved freely from one medium to another. You're also encouraged to create thumbnail sketches for your figure so that we can have discussions about your composition as well as obtaining a resource artist, just like we've done in other units. Remember, this is so you create a plan for what you are doing so you don't waste materials because art materials are expensive. Another strong recommendation is that you should mix your own blacks. As you can see here, the image on the left has pre-mixed black used in it, and it's a much flatter painting than the image on the right, which has black that has been mixed from the colors in the composition. When you are trying to mix black, there are several different ways that you can do it. There are 2 shown here on the screen, and we'll talk about other color combinations in further units. I also encourage you to look at the figure examples that are not only in this presentation, but are in the Canvas module as well. While you do need to compare your work to a resource artist for this assignment, you should always look at the examples in the module or presentation because there are many images that may make you think of things you haven't thought of before that will enhance your artistic ability. Please realize I'm going to present things about how figures have been represented throughout the history of art, but this is just an introduction and only touches on a few art movements, which is another reason you should look at the examples I just mentioned. Humans have been representing our history with figures from the beginning of time. From cave paintings to the depiction of pharaohs and even paintings on pottery, the human figure and storytelling has been part of what makes the human condition so captivating. Long before books were mass-produced, humans took the time to depict figures in books. Artists were commissioned by churches and other wealthy people to create images for many purposes, sometimes even depicting themselves in their creations, as you can see in this Van Eyck. The artist is in the very background of the painting, right in the middle. Whether artists were trying to capture the quality of light and perspective like what can be seen here, or were inspiring each other's compositions hundreds of years apart, all artists experimented with different ideas, such as removing backgrounds, depicting accurate light quality, or foreshortening the figure, which means drawing or painting the figure pointing at you. This is harder to draw or paint because you really have to concentrate on the shapes you see as you are creating. Now things are going to get interesting because we're going to talk about the rise of abstraction. As we move into the 20th century, artists began to challenge traditional representations of the figure and other objects as well. To illustrate this, I'm going to show you what happened in a very short period of time to Pierre Mondrian's work. While it is not figurative, the same thing was taking place with other artists, as we will see shortly. Mondrian's journey from representational to non-representational art demonstrates this gradual process of abstraction. Abstraction means that you're reducing the object to the most basic parts of what you can see. It took about 15 years if you look at the dates in the paintings shown here. Representational abstraction means that the artist simplified the objects, but the objects in the painting still are identifiable in the finished product. Non-representational abstraction means that the artist simplified the objects so much that the viewer can no longer tell what objects are represented in the painting. This shift influenced not just painting, but also architecture and design, as you can see in Schrader House, created by Gerrit Rietveld. The house was designed after the architect viewed Mondrian's Broadway Boogie Woogie, which is a representation or topographical view of the streets and buildings in New York City. Before we go any further, I want to share about Picasso. While he was part of the Cubist movement, he was also influential to many art movements in the 20th century. Picasso, like many artists, was affected by the poverty he saw around him in Spain growing up. This is evident in his Blue Period work, where he depicted poor families he saw in everyday life. Picasso was constantly searching and changing styles while he worked. He is most known for his abstraction works, the most famous being Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, where I hope you can see the influence African masks had on the faces he painted in this work. Cubism is another form of abstraction. It was pioneered by Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque, which broke objects into geometric shapes and attempted to show multiple perspectives in one composition. There are 2 types of cubism, analytic and synthetic. Analytic cubism means you're breaking objects down into their most basic shapes. Picasso was a master at this. There were other cubists like Leger who did it as well. Synthetic cubism used a wide range of color, texture, and added materials to paintings as well. The works often included collage elements, which were found materials like newspaper, burlap, chair caning, and rope, to name a few. In review, analytic cubism means breaking objects into their most basic shapes, and synthetic cubism has an increased use of color, wide range of texture, and even added materials to the paintings. Futurism is an offshoot of Cubism. It emerged in Italy, and it is a style of art that celebrated speed and technology. Again, Futurism basically means that it's showing how objects change over time or the movement of objects in space. Here is an example of how artists worked in multiple media. You can see how Boccioni's paintings and sculptures had the same idea of attempting to move through space. The curved and pointed lines in different objects he would draw, paint, or sculpt. Futurism, like many art movements, extended beyond painting to sculpture and even photography. In photography, Futurism is known as photodynamism. Hopefully, you noticed that it has a tendency to look blurry because the artists are trying to depict how objects move through space and time. What they're doing is leaving the shutter open longer so that you get a blurred motion in the camera from whatever the figure or object is doing. Following the Mexican Revolution from 1910 to 1920, the muralist art movement emerged. Diego Rivera, Jose Clemente Orozco, and David Alfaro Siqueiros became known as Los Tres Grandes, the Three Greats. They created large-scale murals in public spaces, often depicting historical and social themes. Each artist had their unique style and perspective on Mexican history and culture. They challenged traditional representations of the human form. These artistic movements had a lasting impact on figure painting. They challenged traditional representations of the human form, they introduced new techniques and perspectives in art, and they demonstrated how art could be used for social and political commentary. Rivera, for example, wanted the Mexican people to take pride in their heritage. Another notable form of mural painting is frescoes, which means the artist painted on wet plaster. Here you can see an image of the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Each section has its own name. Here you can see the creation of Adam. And if we go back to this central image, the creation of Adam is actually right here in the middle. It's very, very small compared to the rest of the entire mural, but that mural is about as big as our gym. I would again encourage you to look at the figure examples, which I may show in class. And at this point, you should be able to summarize what you understand about the figure, Cubism, Futurism, and Mexican muralist paintings, and how they affected works that are created now.